It's kind of like if the movies Iron Man and Thor had a baby, and that movie baby grew up in Africa. That's right, today we're going to be talking about the 2018 superhero movie Black Panther, directed by Ryan Coogler and written by Coogler and Joe Robert Cole. Black Panther is starring Chadwick Boseman as King T'Challa / Black Panther, Michael B. Jordan as the villain Erik Killmonger, and Lupita Nyong'o as Nakia. Black Panther is rated PG-13 for prolonged sequences of action violence and a brief, rude gesture. So this is going to be a review packed full of spoilers. If you're looking for something that has no spoilers, stop this now, go check out my itty bitty review. Now that that's out of the way, the first category of my grid is going to be writing, plot, and genre. So I thought the plot structure of Black Panther was pretty solid overall. At least as far as a first viewing goes, I didn't spot any gaping holes, but it was a little bit predictable at times. I didn't really do anything new as far as Marvel movies go. Some of the more predictable parts in the script I thought came, particularly the second Killmonger arrives in Wakanda. You pretty much know every single step of the plot until the final battle. I also felt like Black Panther borrowed some aspects from other Marvel movies. In particular, I thought it borrowed quite a bit from Iron Man. The scene that stands out the most is the end scene where he gives the press conference. That scene just reminded me so much of the last scene of Iron Man where he tells everybody, I am Iron Man. It came so late in the movie, and it's still a very good scene, so it didn't really hinder my enjoyment any, but I thought it was worth noting. And then I also thought it borrowed quite a bit from the Thor trilogy. We definitely have very similar kind of character goals and needs between Thor and King T'Challa. It's not like the storylines are identical, but I just felt like there was just a similar feel to it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm excited to see them in a movie together. I think that could be an interesting pairing. It's just worth noting that there were definitely some similarities there. I did like that T'Challa's outer goals throughout the film kind of shifted and evolved as the plot moved forward, which is a little bit more on the unusual side for a comic book movie. Typically, the outer goal is pretty much defeat the bad guy. And that's it. And I thought that this movie did a good job of having a lot more layers to it than that. And in the end, he didn't even really quite want to defeat the bad guy. He knew that he had to. Killmonger was a threat to Wakanda, but a threat of their own making. So it's definitely a more complex outer goal than we usually see in Marvel movies. So I thought that aspect of the script was really good. And just on a quick note about the genre, I didn't really think that it did too much, within this specific genre conventions. It was very much so an origin story, and it followed all the similar beats and tropes of an origin story. But there is, that massive cultural importance and a shift within the genre as far as representation goes. I'm not brushing that aside, and I definitely will get more into that in some of the other categories. I just didn't think as far as genre conventions go, that's not really where the major talking points were coming from. And the last thing I'm going to talk about as far as the plot and genre of the movie goes, I just wanted to mention that the exposition throughout Black Panther was handled in a really, really good way. I love the opening scene where we see the kind of the shifting images. I felt like a father telling a boy a story, and we're a part of that, and we get all of this important exposition about Wakanda and the Black Panther in the process, and it just felt really natural. And then throughout the movie as well, as we're introduced to the villains, both Clow and Killmonger, I thought their exposition was just handled really well. So I thought it did a much better job than most origin story superhero movies as far as giving us exposition without it being an entire movie of exposition. So for the plot and genre category, I gave Black Panther an 8.5 out of 10, which I consider to be great. So even though, like I said, there's definitely some predictableness within the plot, and it's not really doing anything super new within the script, it's still very solid, and it still has some really strong points that despite the predictableness and despite the just the kind of general sameness to some other Marvel movies, it's still escalated into that, something that I consider to be a great script. So the next category is going to be characters. I thought in general the characters were explored fairly well. This is definitely a cast of extremely likable characters. That said, I did feel like as far as T'Challa's journey throughout the movie goes, I mentioned within the plot category that his outer goals had a really natural way of kind of shifting with the plot and driving the plot forward that way. But I didn't really feel like his inner needs were explored sufficiently. I just really didn't feel like his emotional journey was explored thoroughly enough for my liking. There was still definitely an emotional journey there, and I liked his interactions with Killmonger and his struggles with coming to terms with what had happened to Killmonger and how to deal with it as a result. I thought all of that was handled very well, but just kind of in general, the more emotional side of the story I feel like could have been a stronger emphasis and a stronger drive throughout the movie. I particularly enjoyed the female characters throughout Black Panther, and I don't think I'm alone in that. That seems to be a resounding opinion. I think that Lupita Nyong'o's character, Nakia, is one of the more well-developed love interests that we have throughout the MCU, probably second only to Jane Foster. I also thought King T'Challa's relationships with the women throughout the movie were just really interesting and well developed. We have Nakia, who's on the side of, she wants to leave Wakanda and help people and give aid, and that's her goal throughout the movie. And then on the other side of that, you have Okoye, who is, completely loyal to the throne of Wakanda to the point of serving Killmonger. And then there's T'Challa in the middle, trying to find the balance between loyalty to his country and giving aid to those in need. So I thought that was just a really well done, dynamic between those characters. And then I also just love his relationship with his sister Shuri. And I just thought she's probably my new favorite character in the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. She kicked ass. She's the smartest person in the Marvel Cinematic Universe now. I hope someday we get to see her and Tony Stark or even Bruce Banner in a room together, just to see that exchange and that comparison and to show this very, very smart, very, very young African woman just showing these, middle-aged white guys what's what. I just think that's really exciting, and just her character is just she was just a fun character, and her entire personality didn't revolve around being the smart scientist. She had spunk and humor. So I just think she's just kick-ass, and she's, like I said, I think my new favorite character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She was just awesome. I also thought that Erik Killmonger was a fairly well-developed villain. I think probably the only better villain we've gotten throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to come with Loki. And I think because similarly to Loki, that his goals throughout the movie and his reason for being villainous were very personal, and he felt his family right, his birthright, not just as far as being a prince of Wakanda, but as far as being able to live in Wakanda. And he was forsaken by his own people. And I did like what they did with his character, and I particularly liked the exchange we get where, during the ritual when he talks to his father. I thought that was a great comparison to the exchanges that we see with T'Challa and his father. So I thought that was really strong, and there's just some good character development going on throughout that character. But that said, he still felt a little bit one-dimensional or maybe two-dimensional, just not quite three-dimensional. But like I said, still second under Loki. So as far as characters go, I gave the category a 7.5 out of 10, which I consider to be good. I consider an 8.0 to be the beginning of the great range, so it was close, but just not quite pushed there, largely because I felt that there was a little bit of a lack of emotions, particularly with the character of T'Challa, so there was, a little bit of a lack there, and even with Killmonger, I just wish we had seen a little bit more development, but the secondary characters I really thought carried the movie in a good way, so that definitely got it some points and pushed it close to that great range, but it just fell a little bit short, but is still solidly good. So the next category in the grade is going to be acting and casting. And I thought the acting overall was pretty solid. I loved all three of the female characters. You know, each one brought something fresh to the film and to the MCU that we really haven't seen before, particularly with female characters. So that, as far as the acting and casting there, that was extremely solid. Boseman as T'Challa also did a really great job. You know, he was very strong and very powerful, but also had a bit of an emotional vulnerability to him. So I just really thought that he did a really great job of balancing those aspects to his character. I thought one of the weaker performances throughout the movie, and I kind of think I'm in the minority with this, but I thought Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger, I mean, he did a good job throughout, but I just didn't think he was as strong as, all of the other leads throughout the movie. Particularly when it comes to, I was talking about with Chadwick Boseman, that he did a really good job of balancing kind of that strength and the more emotional side of his performance. Whereas I felt with Michael B. Jordan, when he had to be really aggressive, like during the challenge scenes, or, when we first see him as king and his interactions with the Wakandan people, those scenes were really good. And then we see scenes where he has, it's more of an emotional scene, like the scene where he's talking to his father during the ritual. I thought he did a really good job in that scene as well. But then when you have the scenes where he has to kind of mix that, aggressive and emotional performances, I didn't really feel like those scenes were as good. Particularly the most notable one for me was his death scene. Had great lines in there, and it it wasn't bad. It wasn't like I was cringing during the performance or anything. It was a good performance. But I just felt like it lacked some of the depth that the other performances throughout the movie had. So in that way, I felt like his performance was one of the weaker throughout the movie, but still pretty strong overall. So for acting and casting, I gave the category an 8.4 out of 10, which I consider to be great. So the next category in the grid is going to be lighting. I think as far as the visuals go throughout Black Panther, this is easily the most beautiful movie throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And a lot of that comes within the lighting. The cinematographer, Rachel Morrison, actually just became the first female cinematographer ever nominated for an Academy Award for cinematography for her work on Mudbound. And she also worked with Coogler in the movie Fruitvale Station. I thought the lighting throughout Black Panther did a really good job of maintaining a balance between looking fairly realistic while also just exceptionally gorgeous. And some of the scenes that, didn't look quite as realistic, most notably the hallucination scenes, did a really good job of setting the mood and even telling the story throughout the lighting. And I also thought the lighting did a good job of again, setting the mood and telling the story during the scene when the women go to the Jabari tribe to ask for help when they think that T'Challa has died. It was just a really nice, stark contrast to what we had seen throughout the movie so far. We had the really warm colors in the desert, almost always shot in the day, and then you have nighttime, snowy, very cool colors there. So just the color palettes and obviously the locations as well, just did a really good job of contributing to the mood as well as the story. And yeah, just overall, like I said before, the lighting throughout Black Panther was just gorgeous. So I gave the lighting overall an 8.6 out of 10, which is great. So the next category in the grid is going to be camera work. Like the lighting, I thought Morrison did a fairly good job throughout the movie with the camera work. I loved the kind of sweeping landscape shots of the savannah, having the in more industrial, technological city still balanced within the savannah. I just thought the camera work within those scenes were really well done, and there were just enough shots like that to really show the beauty and the uniqueness of Wakanda without being too overboard or lingering. I also thought the compositions throughout Black Panther were fairly well done, though for the most part nothing really stands out as being exceptionally different or gorgeous or anything like that. The one that stands out more than any others is going to be during T'Challa's first again, for lack of a better word, hallucination scene, when he's walking towards the tree that's full of the Black Panthers. And I just thought that was just very well composed and just, looked like a painting, and just did a really good job of setting that dreamlike state. And then when you get the interactions between T'Challa and his father, it's more close-up shot, reverse shot, and kind of gets, more into a realistic kind of framing while still having the, the different lighting and obviously the CGI sky and all that good stuff. So you still get a little bit of that dreamlike quality, but it, transitions into being more about this conversation between a father and son. I had a lot of issues with the challenge scenes, both with the length as well as the CGI, both of which I'll get into with the editing. But as far as the compositions goes, I really liked the use of the shallow focus, and I thought that the compositions within those scenes was very well done, but the editing unfortunately kind of hindered the beauty of those shots from fully coming through, which is a shame. But as far as the compositions go, I thought that those were very well composed action scenes that just kind of fell apart, at least somewhat, on the editing floor. I did wish there had been a little bit more camera movement or, differing camera angles, things like that, particularly during fight scenes. But other than that, I thought the camera work throughout was fairly solid. Nothing really stood out as being bad, but I did feel like there were potentially some missed opportunities to go a little bit above and beyond with some of the camera work throughout Black Panther. So I gave the camera work overall a 7.2 out of 10, which is pretty solidly good. It's still kind of far away from that 8.0 range where I start to consider it great, but it's equally far away from the mediocre range, which ends at a 6.0. So it's solidly good. It doesn't do anything awful, but like I said, a lot of missed opportunities for going above and beyond and getting into that great range. Now we get to the next category, which is going to be editing and special effects. And this is by far the weakest category for me. The pacing of the movie overall was fairly solid, but like I mentioned in the last category, there were definitely some scenes that could have been cut down, most notably both of the challenge scenes. I just felt like, we knew how both of those were going to end, and just went on a little bit too long for my tastes. But I tend to not like drawn out action scenes like that. The action scene at the end I thought was really well done. I like the bigger scale action, but when it comes to just one-on-one combat, that gets old pretty fast, at least for me. So I felt like those scenes for sure could have been cut down. And then there's just that big chunk in the middle where everybody thought T'Challa was dead, and obviously we as an audience know that he's not. And even though I really liked that we got to see some great scenes with Killmonger, and we got to see all three of the female characters had a lot of screen time in there, so I liked that we got to explore these other characters. But I just felt like, some of those scenes could have been cut down a little bit to kind of, move the plot forward and get us back to Black Panther. So I had a little bit of issue with the pacing, but overall, it's a 2 hour and 15-minute movie. I feel like maybe 5 to 10 minutes could have been cut out here and there, got it closer to that 2 hour mark. But overall, it's not like some movies I've seen recently where I feel like half an hour could have been cut out. It was just a little bit here and there. I also thought some of the action scenes in general were just a little bit lackluster for, MCU standards. The first time we see Black Panther when he goes to Nigeria to get Nakia, I felt like that action scene was pretty poorly edited, and we just, that's really the only time in the movie, aside from the challenges, where we see Black Panther fighting alone. So I would have really liked to see, more emphasis on his fighting style and, just the way he moves. And we've seen him in Civil War. He has a very unique, very cat-like movement and fighting style. And it was cool. And I think that, that was kind of lost in this movie. We get it more in the final fight scene, but everything leading up to that was very much so just kind of standard hand-to-hand combat kind of thing, or like the scene in the beginning when he's getting Nakia. It's very, just very jump cutty, very hidden in the shadows, don't really get good views of him. So I thought that, just the editing throughout that scene, I would have liked to see more Black Panther. As far as the special effects go, I thought they were fairly solid throughout. Nothing, Justice League awful or anything, but definitely still not quite as strong as I would like to see. I thought the car chase scene was really well done, and most of the final fight scene was really well done. The rhinos, I thought, looked a little cartoony. I really wanted that to be an, awesome big moment, and it kind of fell apart after, a couple shots in, just because they just looked CGI. So that was a little bit unfortunate. And then during the challenge scenes, it definitely fell into the bad green screen category, and particularly because those scenes went on for a decent length of time, and because of the way they were shot with the really shallow focus, it just made the background really stand out and really just really look fake. So for the editing and special effects category overall, I gave Black Panther a 6.3 out of 10, which I still consider to be good, but it's getting, very close to that mediocre range. The next category in my grid is going to be sound. And this category is going to cover pretty much anything you hear throughout the movie. That said, I think the most notable thing to talk about with Black Panther is going to be the score and the soundtrack. So the soundtrack is filled with original songs written by Kendrick Lamar, and the score is composed by Swedish composer Ludwig Göransson. And for me, the score stood out a lot more than the soundtrack, although both were phenomenal and definitely different than things we've heard throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe to date. I know the composer actually went to Somalia and studied with local musicians for like a month and ended up going on tour for a while with a very famous African musician, Baba Mal, and he just really, studied African tribal music and African music in general, and just got a really good grasp of what instruments to use and just different composition ideas. And it just really gives something unique and fresh and special to this movie, and something very uniquely African, which is interesting coming from a Swedish composer, but it seems to work well. There were a few compositions throughout the score that seemed to fall a little bit more into the standard MCU soundtrack kind of vibe, but for the most part they were all very strong, and I thought the score was just fantastic. And I just think it's culturally important that we have a movie about African characters taking place in Africa, and we I'll get more into the aesthetics later, but we have, just the visuals throughout the movie are very African, and then we have this score that's very African, and it's very, I've heard the movie described as an Afrocentric movie, which I think is fairly accurate, so I wanted to talk about that within the sound category, because I just thought that the soundtrack was really great too, with the original songs by Lamar, so yeah, just the music overall was phenomenal. So that said, there really wasn't a ton of note within the things like the overall sound mix or sound design or sound effects. Nothing was awful. Everything still had a very high quality, but nothing really stood out as being exceptional within those categories. So the overall score for sound is going to be a 7.6 out of 10, which is good. The next category in the grid is going to be aesthetics, and this is going to cover character aesthetics of hair, makeup, and costumes, as well as environmental aesthetics, which is going to be sets, props, and locations. And I thought this was easily the strongest category throughout the whole movie, particularly with the character aesthetics. We have just very traditional African hairstyles and clothing and makeup, all of those things, which is just culturally important to have that representation, and it just looked great. It fit well within the universe. I love when Shuri and Nakia at the end of the movie don traditional attire and go out and kick ass. I thought that was just very powerful and just a great use of costumes and makeup to help tell the story, especially because, they're not superheroes, they're just civilians essentially fighting to help their king, but they donned the traditional attire that they wore during the challenge ritual and just went out and kicked ass, and I thought that was just phenomenal. And just the costumes throughout just take a really unique blend of more modern fashion with very traditional African tribal fashion. And I particularly love that you have the 5 different Wakandan tribes, and they each have their own unique look based on different cultures throughout Africa, and it was just very phenomenally done. So for sure the character aesthetics was just on point and just phenomenal, and just the cultural importance of having that representation of African characters and African influence was just amazing. And then within the environmental aesthetics, we have the sweeping shots of the savannah, and then kind of blended that within the very technologically advanced, Wakandan city. And I loved, Shuri's lab when we see that very, very high tech, very, James Bond type setting. Overall, I loved the tech that was used. That I'm not a car person at all, but even the cars looked really cool. It just, within the environmental aesthetics, had a really great blend of, the natural African savannah with very high-tech, technological advancements. So I just thought that was a really cool interplay. So for aesthetics overall, I easily gave it a 10 out of 10. Perfect. So the next category in the grid is going to be impact on film. And I think for sure Black Panther is the most critically acclaimed Marvel movie to date. Thor Ragnarok got a lot of attention as well, but for vastly different reasons, and I really don't think that movie is going to stand the test of time nearly as well as Black Panther. I mean, this movie is important. You can say it's just a movie, or more degradingly, it's just a superhero movie, but it's something that the masses are consuming and enjoying. It has such amazing representation, and it's just gonna, I really think this movie's hopefully gonna show studios, like, people want representation. Stop trying to say, nobody will go see a black superhero, or nobody will go see a female superhero. Like, this movie shows both. Like, you've got the kick-ass females everybody loves. You have a whole cast of black actors that everybody is loving. It's the highest grossing February opening ever. I think it's going to be one of the top grossing Marvel movies ever. People want to see representation in movies. It's what people want. And this movie is showing that. So I mean, just the importance of this movie. You can say it's just a movie all you want, but it's important. So for the critical impact, I gave Black Panther a 9 out of 10, largely based on the Tomato Meter score as of the recording of this review. And I gave it an 8 out of 10 for audience cult impact, based on the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. I think that score is likely going to increase both as more people see the movie and as time goes on. I think it's going to have, like I mentioned with Thor Ragnarok, I think that movie is going to be more forgettable over time, whereas this movie, people are going to remember and revisit much more often. For historical and inspirational impact, I did go ahead and give it a 9.5 out of 10. I mean, this movie is going to be breaking records, and for the most part, the first black superhero, and one of the first major blockbusters to really show, representation matters, it's important, people care about it, it is profitable, this isn't just a cultural importance. And I really think that after this movie, after the success of Black Panther, we are gonna start seeing more representation in film, even more so. I mean, this was true after Wonder Woman as well, but that movie, it's a good movie. I liked it, but it had a lot more flaws than Black Panther, and I think in a lot of ways Black Panther is also doing for women what Wonder Woman did for women. I mean, there's 3 very kick-ass characters in this movie, all for different reasons. You have Nakia, who's more of a philanthropist and just wants to bring good to the world and help people. You have Okoye, who is very loyal to her country, very patriotic, and very she's a warrior. If we could see her and Wonder Woman in a room together, that would be an interesting day. And then you have Shuri, who's just incredibly intelligent and kicks ass through her inventions and just her intelligence. So you have these 3 very unique personalities with very unique skill sets that are all kick-ass, and all African women. So it's just the representation and the diversity within this movie. It goes on multiple levels. So yeah, for historical impact, for sure, I think this movie is going to make history. And then inspirational impact as well. Like I said, I think studios are going to be inspired to make more movies with representation, because that's what the people want. Clearly, that's what the people want. And this movie isn't, the only movie working towards that goal. Like I mentioned before, we had Wonder Woman. We also have more indie movies that are, reaching critical success, like Moonrise last year and Lady Bird this year. So there's definitely both on, blockbuster success and critical success. We're having more representation. And so I think studios are gonna start realizing that, and there's gonna be a change in Hollywood, and I think the Black Panther is gonna be one of the biggest turning points for that, just because of the mass success and mass popularity it seems to be getting already within a week of it opening. So those 3 categories are gonna average out to an 8.83 out of 10, which I consider to be great. The next category is going to be overall enjoyment, and I gave this movie a 9.5 out of 10. Pretty much the only thing keeping me from giving it a perfect 10 was some of the issues I had with the pacing. There were just a few times, particularly within the challenge fight scenes, where I just felt a little bit bored and like, come on, let's wrap it up. So, it didn't happen enough, or, to a severe enough extent for me to lower it down more than a half point, but definitely enough that, I didn't give it that perfect 10. But a 9.5 out of 10, that's still a very, very great movie and very highly enjoyable. So I did give Black Panther a little bit of extra credit as well. I gave it 1 point because the storyline carried pretty seamlessly over from Civil War, yet we really didn't get any cameos aside from the, Winter Soldier cameo at the very end, which is leading into Infinity War, and I don't think anybody was super surprised after the end of Civil War when we knew that Bucky was in Wakanda, and it was, so far as the second end credit sequence that we see him, and that's the only cameo we see from any Avengers character or any MCU character, despite this being a Phase 3 origin story movie, which, typically has at least one scene with, some other character thrown in. So I really liked that this movie allowed Black Panther to have his own story, but they did a good job of carrying that story over from Civil War, but keeping it very much so, T'Challa's story and Wakanda's story. So I really liked that aspect and gave it a point of extra credit for that. I also gave it a half point of extra credit because I felt like the Stan Lee cameo was one of the best we've seen. Not as far as the writing goes, but as far as the acting. Typically, I think I'm the only one who thinks this, but I tend to not really love the Stan Lee cameos. I love Stan Lee. It's kind of fun that he's in them. I get it. But he's just such a bad actor, and it takes me out of the movie for that scene every time. And I thought this was one of his more natural performances, even though the scene was still, the cameo went on a little bit long for my taste, still kind of took me out of the movie. But I felt like it was one of the stronger cameos he's had, possibly the strongest as far as his acting ability goes. So it didn't take me out of the movie as much as some of his other cameos. So I went ahead and gave Black Panther a little extra half point of extra credit for that. So total score for Black Panther is going to be an 83.93, which I consider to be a great movie. It's a solid Marvel movie. It does fall into some of the more predictable Marvel plot points. It's still a very solidly enjoyable movie, and the strengths far outnumber the weaknesses, for me at least. And I think this is easily my second favorite Marvel movie. I think I like Thor a little bit more. I haven't gone through to watch Thor since I've redone my grid, so I would like to, someday I'd like to go through and watch all the Marvel movies and rank them in order, and then I'd be able to definitively say which one is my favorite. But as far as just from memory and going mostly on overall enjoyment, Black Panther is easily number 2, very close under Thor. And like I said, you can say it's just a movie all you want, but it's important. So yeah, it's a great movie. I recommend it. Obviously, if you don't like superhero movies or if you're not a big Marvel fan, things like that, probably don't go see it. You're just gonna be pissed off because you don't like it, because you don't like Marvel movies. Like, this movie isn't gonna change your mind on the genre or on the MCU or anything like that. But as far as, if you like MCU movies, this one, make sure you see this one. It's good. So that's my take on Black Panther. That's really all I have to say for this nitty-gritty review. So I will see you next time when I talk about Annihilation. Hey, thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe to Griddy Films on YouTube by pressing this button. Also, like and share this video. You can follow Griddy Films on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for new video announcements, entertainment news, fun pics, and more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.